Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talkie Dokie. And in this episode, we will be talking all about mechanical keyboard foams. So, in this episode, we aim to answer the question to foam or not to foam. Guys, this is a different episode from what we're used to. For the past few months or so, this channel have grown from mechanical keyboard reviews and switch reviews and a little bit on tutorial. This is how I started the channel. And for quite some time, I forgot to create contents on exactly those tutorials and useful information to help the community, especially the beginners going into the hobby. And this episode is exactly that. No reviews, no sponsors, simply a topic, an opinion to give back to the community. So before we begin, again, please do take note that everything that I'm about to share to you is all based on my personal experience and my opinion. So this video is geared towards beginners entering the hobby who does not really know yet how to figure out how all of these foams work and what they do to affect the sound and the feel of your mechanical keyboard. So if you're an enthusiast who is deep into the hobby, you might still find this video useful, but if you have opinions that contradict mine, it's all fair game. I am not saying that mine is the absolute correct opinion, all right? In this video, we will answer the question, to foam or not to foam? Should you really use mechanical keyboard foams? As well as I'll be discussing to you about the different types of foam, what they do, how they affect the sound of your build, and how they affect the feel of your build. For those of you who do not have time to watch the entire video, let's leave it with the conclusion. So, to foam or not to foam, it's actually a personal preference. So it depends on your build. It depends on your preference on what you want to achieve. Basically, again, it's a very subjective hobby. But for those of you who have time, watch the whole video as I run you through the different types of foams and what they do. Before we dive into the discussion on the different types of foam, here's a sound of a keyboard that has all of the foams in them, and this keyboard can be described as foamy or foam sounding. And here's the sound of a keyboard that has no foams in them, and this is what they call raw sounding keyboard, very open sounding keyboard. So there you have it. Which one is better? Which one is good? Which one is bad? None. None of the two. Depends on your preference. I personally love both keyboards. I've been using them in my rotation, and there are times when I love the foamy sounding keyboard. There are times that I love the raw and open sounding keyboard. Alrighty. So here we have the plate PCB sandwich that I have from the Mr. Suit, and minus the switches. So this has been placed out of the case and removed the switches. So this is what you will typically see when you open up your keyboard, and this is the layers of arrangement of what you typically encounter when you open up your keyboard, again with all the foams in them. So let's go by these layers one by one, and I will share to you what I think these layers have and how these layers affect the sound and the feel of your keyboards. Of course, there are a lot of materials, different materials from all these layers, and it will affect the final output. So what I will be discussing would be the general effect of these layers. So this is your keyboard plate. So this is what holds your switches in place. And this is a topic for a whole another video, because depending on the plate that you're using would probably affect the sound and the feel of your build. So let's put that aside. The first layer of foam that you will encounter in a fully foamed keyboard is the plate foam. So there are a lot of materials that can be used as a plate foam, but the most common material would be your EVA material, your EVA plate foam. And I think and I feel primarily what this does is it tidies up. It tidies up or it cleans up the sound of your keyboard. And I think this foam, this EVA plate foam, is very effective if you have keyboards that are hollow sounding, if you have switches that are loose sounding, because when you use that plate foam, when you use this plate foam, it tidies up the sound. It makes it cleaner at the expense of making the sound a little bit more deep and a little bit more muted. But among the foams in the keyboard, personally, this is the foam that I use the most. Why? Because it cleans up the sound, but it doesn't really alter the sound that much. So you can still hear the sound of your switches, you can still hear the overall sound of your keyboard, but it just simply makes it a little bit cleaner. So I really love the plate foam, and in most of my builds, I use the plate foam. The next layer that you would probably encounter is the PE foam. So the PE foam is that thin layer of foam that goes on top of your PCB, and this is the most controversial foam of them all. This PE foam, if I'm not mistaken, was popularized by Owl Lab, so in their Jelly Epoch and their Mr. Soup, and it brings about a really nice, loud, poppy, and quote-unquote marbly sound. It brings about that marbly sound signature. And why is this so polarizing? Because the PE foam basically narrowed the gap between higher end boards and your lower end board. What do I mean by that? Because of the PE foam, it makes most keyboards sound relatively close to each other. A cheap board with the PE foam would sound a little bit close. Probably not close, so close, but would sound very good as compared to the high-end boards with PE foam as well. So among all of the foams, the PE foam, for my opinion, makes a lot of boards sound very similar. With that being said, among your foams, the PE foam would be the one to alter the sound quality of your build the most. When you use the PE foam, you're altering it so much so that in most of the builds I've done, once the PE foam is there, sometimes it's kind of hard to distinguish the sound between switches, between plate materials. So that's how much of a game changer this PE foam was, and that's how much that it has become so polarizing that a lot of people, a lot of enthusiasts, a lot of those purists would say, PE foam, I don't like that. All right. So that's the PE foam. So underneath is the PCB, and the last layer that we would probably encounter would be the lowercase foam. So the lowercase foam is placed under the PCB. It sits in the lower case of the keyboard, and what it does primarily is remove hollowness. So in keyboards, when you have a lot of space underneath the keyboards, or in keyboards with aluminum build, especially those budget aluminum keyboards where there is a lot of hollowness in the case, this one helps reduce reverberation, and this one helps reduce pinging and hollowness. At the expense of what? Since it's placed underneath your PCB, if there's not much space in the lower case, this foam in a way reduces the flex or the bounce and the play of your keyboard. And I have had builds wherein there is day and night difference between the bounce and the play of the keyboard when you use the lower case foam, such as in the Mr. Suit, such as in the Keychron Q series keyboards, and even in the Monsgeek keyboards. When you place the lower case foam, it becomes a little bit stiff because there's no room for your PCB, for your plate PCB assembly to bounce. But it does really remove a lot the hollowness, if there's any, in your build. So those are the most common types of foams that you would encounter. And maybe we can add to the discussion the tape mod. So the tape mod, though it's not considered a foam, it's placed underneath the PCB. So it's a layer of masking tape that is placed underneath the PCB. So basically the tape mod is putting a layer of tape as such, putting it underneath the PCB. So it goes something like this. All right. So what this does is, next to the PE foam, I feel that the tape mod, when used improperly, meaning when the first time I built keyboards, I was putting 2 or 3 layers of tape mod. When used improperly, it alters the sound so much that, like the PE foam, it removes the character of your switches and the character of your keyboard. All right. So how does it sound? It sounds very poppy. So just imagine the sound of the tape when you're opening it. There. There's a thin papery sound. So when you use incorrectly, it's a turnoff for me personally. But a lot of boards will benefit from the tape mod if used sparingly. So in most of my builds nowadays, I just use a single layer of tape mod, and what it does is it amplifies the sound. It makes it more lively, a little bit poppy, without removing the character of your switches and your build. So do try it out for yourself. For me, recently, most of the time, I just use a single layer of tape mod. If I feel that the sound quality is a bit too dull and a bit too muted, without using the P foam, I would use the tape mod. Between the two, I'd prefer the tape mod. So let's now go to my preference. So my preference for most of the time, if I'm not going to do a full foam build, so again, preference at the end of the day, my favorite foam to use is the plate foam because it tidies up the sound, makes it cleaner without really removing the character of your switches and your overall build. And next to the plate foam would be the tape mod. So I really love the tape mod if I want to make the sound more lively, more poppy. And next to that is the PE foam. So there are builds where I love the PE foam. I love the foam sound, such as in my OwlLab keyboards. They are foam dependent, but really awesome nonetheless. And the last probably would be the lower case foam. Very rarely do I use the lower case foam. I prefer using the polyfill if I want to remove some hollowness. So a polyfill and a force break mod would be my go-to mod, and not really the lower case foam. So there you have it. Those are the different types of common foams that you can put or you can modify in your custom mechanical keyboards. Okay, so what is my personal take on this topic? There will be times that you will hear the comment in a lot of YouTube videos, in a lot of opinionated reviews, or from your friends that that keyboard is so foamy, or that keyboard sounds foamy. It sounds quote unquote foamy. And to me, honestly, if you ask me, it really boils down to preference. Being foamy doesn't mean that your keyboard sounds bad. All right? I have a lot of keyboard builds in my collection that are foam sounding and I love using them. At the same time, I have a lot of keyboard builds in my collection that do not have any foam at them and I love using them as well. So what I'm telling you is basically I appreciate the whole spectrum, from a keyboard that sounds too foamy to a keyboard that's very raw and open sounding. So it all boils down at the end of the day to preference, because as I always say in my videos, this hobby is very, very subjective. So should you foam or should you not foam? It's really up to you. What do you want to achieve? What do you want to get in terms of feel, in terms of primarily sound? Because majority of what these foams do are to modify the sound of your keyboard. And at the end of the day, it's you who will be telling whether that build is nice or not. Don't let other people tell you otherwise. There's no right or wrong answer in this hobby. There is no right or wrong sound in this hobby. It really depends to you. If you're pleased and happy with a foamy sounding keyboard, just like the OwlLab keyboards, the Mr. Suit and the OwlLab Spring, then fine. Those are great keyboards. Those are endgame keyboards in my collection. And they're really foamy. Nothing bad with that. If you enjoy a very open sound, very raw sounding keyboard like the Tomo that I have, then by all means, go. All right? So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you find it useful. And probably I'll be putting out more content that is related to topics like this. Let me know in the comment what you want to hear next. What aspect of the mechanical keyboard hobby would you want to hear next? Very opinionated review. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of comments from the viewers out there. But nonetheless, I hope you find it useful. I hope this is helpful for you guys out there starting to build your mechanical keyboard and going into the journey. This is Talkie Dokie. Thank you. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.